Okay, that's great. So, what would you say? Do you get involved in issues around, with the, the trust and Medicaid spin down, or spend down? I
Hmm.
know that's another term that people are really not too familiar with and don't even know to do that.
Yes, and there are a lot of I think there's information out there that could be misleading to people. So Medicaid, the Medicaid program, medically needy is a program for people who don't have their own finances, and so a lot of people who are not really wealthy, but they're not poverty stricken. They're kind of in the middle, and
Okay.
they wonder, well, can we preserve our assets so that we can pass something down to our children or family
Uh huh.
and still at some point qualify for Medicaid programs if we need it later on in life?
Okay.
And so obviously, it wouldn't be a good thing for the government if people could just transfer all their assets to somebody else today and then apply for Medicaid tomorrow.
Right.
So what they have is a 5 year, what they refer to as a 5 year look back, which
Mm-hmm.
means if a person has given anything, uh, large sums, now it could be anything over $500. It doesn't necessarily have to be huge, but if any gifts were made or things were given that were not compensated for over a period of 5 years, then an inquiry is made to see what that is. So if transfers were made, if you transfer your house to your child or something something major, you've closed out your bank accounts and given them over to your cousin, that will disqualify you from Medicaid services for a period of time
Okay.
based on the amount. So when you apply for Medicaid, they'll say, "Well, 2.5 years ago, you you gave away $100,000, and so that's going to disqualify you from Medicaid for X and such months." And it's based on a formula based on the average cost of Medicaid care in an area. So
Okay.
it varies from one area to the next. So that's why people have to be careful about those things, and they need to be able to provide documentation. So if you apply for Medicaid, you have to have 5 years of all your bank account statements. If you've made any transfers of real estate or anything like that, all that comes out. Your tax returns have to be provided, and those things are cross-checked to be sure that someone is not, you know,
Double dipping or
yeah,
yeah,
somebody
yeah,
who's not
manipulating.
qualified is trying to get those benefits. So it's a little bit onerous,
Yeah.
but it's a process that has to be done.
Yeah, I noticed that seems to be sort of a major flaw for families, or something that they overlook, and then they are just caught in the Medicaid spend down. Um, the other thing too is, as you're talking, I'm hearing about, what has been your experience with families? I mean, from your experience, do they know? Are they knowledgeable, and sort of, people that come to you, or are they still sort of, what has been overall sort of your experience working with families?
Oh boy,
Yeah.
it's a wide range
Okay.
of experience, and um, I kind of categorize it that the best experiences are where families have good communication amongst their members, and where the children recognize that everything has to be done on behalf of the parent in the parent's best interest, and sometimes they disagree as to what those things would be,
Right.
and so finding a consensus with that is not always the easiest thing to do. And as an attorney, one of the things that I have to be aware of is that when I come into a situation and I'm working on behalf of an elderly person, that's my client. Their family members are not my client, and it's an interesting thing in the law because in this area of law, you're often dealing with the children more than the elderly parents. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
there are language barriers, or even cognitive barriers where the elderly person doesn't understand everything.
Right.
Uh, so. to some extent, I'm relying on the children to communicate these things, but at the same time, having to be aware that it's the parent who is my client and what's in their interest, even if the children have other ideas.
Right.
So communicating all of those things is what's really important. Um, Sometimes it's unfortunate that different children and different families, they may not agree with each other, and so there may be dissension. And as I referenced before, there are often unresolved emotional issues among siblings that get
Uh-huh.
into the picture too.
Yes.
Um, but overall, if they're see how I could describe it. I think that probably the best situation, and I did one very recently, was luckily for us with the onset of great technology, we're able to do Zoom meetings. And so
Uh-huh.
even if the children don't live near the parent, we've been, in some cases, been able to just have a Zoom meeting with the entire family. So everybody's on board and everybody knows what's going on. And the parent, wants the children to be, part of the process. And in a situation like that, where everybody's questions get answered and any issues that come up are resolved, and then we go from that point on and make the plan. Those are the best because then you know that you have a good chance of success.
Uh-huh.
If you have one child who's doing all the caretaking, but the other ones are not involved at all, or they don't want to be involved, or sometimes the one who's the caretaker is kind of putting a little wall up and preventing the others from being engaged in the process.
Uh-huh.
Then where you have dissension like that, it kind of works against a positive outcome.
Yeah, yeah. You hear again lots of stories, but I think that there's again based on the family dynamic, and there's a lot of history there as well, with families and parents and that relationship. And one thing too that I think needs to be pointed out is that the the structure of that family dynamic changes once parent becomes less independent, you
Oh
know,
yes,
and
yes, hmm
this is a very extreme circumstance. But at one point, I used to work with refugees, and what we found was the when they migrated to the United States, their rate of suicide was significantly higher in the United States compared to in the refugee camp and their country of origin. And we looked at it. We did what's called a psychological autopsy. And what we discovered was that, and usually the head of household were the ones who were killing themselves. And the
oh,
reason is because that structure dynamic changed, where when they resettled in the United States, they were no longer employable, and they
hmm
didn't see any value to themselves and to their contribution to their families as they did in the refugee camp. And that's an extreme, example, but I would definitely see where, and where, what we've been talking about is this change in structure where the children, adult children, then become the parent, if you will,
yes,
to take
yes,
care of their own parents.
hmm
And that is something a huge responsibility that even the children has to sort of accept and come to terms with. What does this
yes,
mean?
absolutely.
You
And
know,
and
uh-huh.
and hopefully they're cognizant enough that I really believe in trying to preserve dignity as much as possible. Because you have an older person who has gone through so many decades, who has held up their family all that time and done so much in their lifetime. And as they're losing their abilities, their sight, their ability to hear, their hand-eye coordination, all those little things are falling away. What falls away with that is their dignity. And
Yes.
I just think it's so important for us, whether we're geriatric caretakers or attorneys or family members, to try to help the individual maintain the sense of dignity to the end. I just think that we owe that to them in any way that we can.
And I think I think you just hit it on the head. I mean, I think that that is something that we need to carry, that torch, that light,
Hmm.
that legacy, of dignity, especially for families and or parents who have, like you said, taken care of families for so many years and try to sort of, was the glue, right? To piece the family together and keep them in, prospering and healthy and safe. Um, and being able to look beyond our differences and being able to then maintain and bring that dignity out, let them continue to live their life in that with dignity. I think it's the critical, and that really speaks to, it sort of reminds me of how we took care of grandma, and what we wanted her to have, that sense of dignity, and she was very particular in her ways and what she wanted, um and rightfully so. If we could, if we were able to afford the for her to maintain those particulars, we were able to do that, and we were very fortunate with the help of home health aid, um, to be able to do that. Uh,
Hmm.
I guess this has been absolutely wonderful. Any last takeaway points or things you want to share, Laura? I mean, this is you.
There is something that we didn't touch on,
Sure,
which I'd like to do if we can do it briefly,
sure.
is especially in guardianship cases in which I've been involved. They have involved people who don't have family, who
Uh,
don't have anybody, and
okay,
some of them have been subject to uh, abuse or excuse me exploitation one way or another, and they were reported to the uh, to the elderly, to the services for the elderly, who would bring a petition to the superior court to have a guardian appointed. And
okay,
those cases are particularly sad because this individual doesn't have anybody. And I've been appointed to be a temporary guardian pending the litigation until a permanent guardian is found, and spent a lot of time looking for family or friends or somebody that would serve as guardian for somebody in their later years. And these cases are just, they're heartbreaking
really,
because as you even as in the role of a temporary guardian for a month or two during the court proceedings, part of the job is finding out as much as you can about the individual. And as I go through their papers and find out about their life, I always find somebody who really had something valuable, during their life, who may have done something important, or even if that person did just the ordinary things, uh, they have value. And to see it just all disappear to the point where nobody really knows who this individual is anymore is very sad. So I just wish that our society, in whatever way we can find ways to find those people and to give them something of value, a friendship or an association or somebody that would be with them during that part of their lives, and hopefully reduce the amount of times that we find people who are just don't have anything anymore.
wow. Yeah, I think that that's really, really important. And what when I hear of guardianship, I also think of the LGBTQ community, because
Hmm.
and I think you and I spoke about this briefly about the, again, they may not have that sort of traditional family structure, for many reasons, right?
Yes. Hmm.
Neglect, rejection, and just sort of been separated from their, families for years. And, that's one of the things that I think that's one of the issues that sort of, that needs to be explored for that community and others as well, Um, you know,
Absolutely, and the law is notoriously slow in catching up with society. I mean, the way people live as families is, not the way families are defined in the law. right?
Yes.
We need to get with it a little bit more on the legal front. It's happening little by little, you know,
Mhm,
but
mhm.
to give support to families in the way that families are constructed in reality is very important.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a great point. Um, well, that concludes our interview. I cannot thank you enough. You've shared so much valuable information, and I hope that this is of benefit, and we get to, reach. I get to target and reach as many people as I can to share your knowledge and your wisdom. So, thank you very much, Laura.
You're most welcome. I hope that this has been helpful and is giving some people some ideas with which they can help their elders live the rest of their lives in a better way. Thank
Yes,
you so much for having me.
yes, absolutely.